7 lessons, 7 secrets. The ancient Stoics mastered the art of not caring, but not in the way most people imagine. Their wisdom, passed down through centuries, wasn't about cultivating apathy or building walls of indifference. Instead, it was a profound and radical redefinition of what truly matters in life. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why they didn't care about most of the things we modern humans obsess over, and how their mastery of this art can fundamentally reshape your existence in ways you never thought possible. But here's the twist. The Stoics didn't master indifference. They mastered freedom, and their secret could change how you live. The revelation came to me during one of the darkest periods of my life. For months, not just weeks, my mind had been a relentless tempest of second-guessing and self-doubt. Every minor mistake, whether real or merely imagined, seemed to take on the weight of a boulder, pressing down on my consciousness with crushing force. Did I come across as too aggressive in that board meeting? Should I have spoken up more during the team brainstorming session? Was my silence interpreted as agreement or apathy? Did that slight tremor in my voice betray my uncertainty? Each thought, each question, added another log to a bonfire of anxiety that threatened to consume me whole. The corporate world I inhabited didn't help. In my corner office on the 32nd floor, surrounded by glass and steel, I had achieved everything society told me I should want. Executive title, check. 6-figure salary, check. Recognition and respect from peers, check. Yet somehow these achievements only amplified my inner turmoil. I'd become something I never thought I'd be, a prisoner to the opinions of others, a hostage to an insatiable need for validation that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. From obsessively checking LinkedIn engagement metrics to analyzing every facial expression during presentations, my happiness had become tethered to things beyond my control. The Instagram likes, the Twitter retweets, the workplace kudos. They were all temporary highs that left me craving more. The worst part wasn't the addiction to approval, it was the crushing awareness that this wasn't sustainable. I was exhausted, caught in an endless loop of overthinking and self-doubt that was slowly eroding my sense of self. It all came to a head on a Wednesday afternoon in late autumn. After a particularly grueling day filled with back-to-back meetings and a failed project presentation, I found myself seeking refuge in a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop I'd never noticed before. The kind of place that somehow existed in the shadows of gleaming skyscrapers, with mismatched furniture and walls lined with dusty books. As I sat there, staring out the window, my overpriced artisanal coffee growing cold and forgotten, the world outside seemed to move at an impossible speed. Business professionals hurried past, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of smartphones, each one caught in their own personal cyclone of responsibilities and worries. Through the streaked glass, their movements created a blur of greys and blacks, like a living impressionist painting of modern despair. "Is this it?" I whispered to myself, my reflection in the window looking more like a stranger than my own face. "Is this what life has become? An endless race toward a finish line that keeps moving further away?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, mixing with the rich aroma of coffee and the soft murmur of distant conversations. That's when I noticed it, a small, unassuming pamphlet tucked between the sugar packets and napkin holder. Its edges were worn smooth, like a stone shaped by years of flowing water, and its title was barely legible through coffee stains and creases. But the words that remained visible seemed to leap off the page. "The Art of Letting Go, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Minds." The pamphlet's title alone posed an irresistible question. What could a centuries-old philosophy possibly teach me about surviving modern life? As I began to read, I realized this wasn't another self-help manifesto about decluttering your closet or cutting ties with toxic friends. Each carefully typed page spoke to something far more fundamental: the art of releasing our death grip on things we were never meant to control in the first place. At the bottom of the final page, written in flowing cursive that stood out against the mechanical typeface, was an invitation. For those ready to learn, visit Oakwood Park at sunset. Look for the gathering beneath the guardian oak. Below this was a simple sketch of a massive tree, its branches spreading across the page like outstretched arms. My rational mind immediately dismissed it. Who meets strangers in parks at sunset based on mysterious pamphlets? It sounded like the beginning of either a horror movie or a New Age scam, but something deeper, call it intuition or desperation, kept pulling me back to those handwritten words. After all, wasn't I already living in a horror story of my own making, trapped in an endless cycle of anxiety and self-doubt? As the sun began its descent, painting the city skyline in shades of amber and rose, I found myself walking through the wrought iron gates of Oakwood Park. The evening air carried the crisp bite of autumn, and fallen leaves crunched beneath my Italian leather shoes that suddenly seemed absurdly out of place in this setting. The park was transitioning from its daytime bustle to evening serenity. Dog walkers and joggers were giving way to couples taking romantic strolls, and photography enthusiasts capturing the golden hour. I followed the main path, trying to look like I knew where I was going, until I spotted it, an ancient oak tree that made the others look like saplings in comparison. As I approached, I noticed them, 7 people seated in a loose circle beneath the tree's sprawling canopy. They weren't what I expected, no flowing robes or crystal necklaces. Instead, I saw what looked like ordinary people: a woman in business casual attire, an elderly man in a cardigan, a college student with a laptop bag, others equally unremarkable. Yet there was something different about them. In their posture, their expressions, they emanated a kind of peace that seemed almost otherworldly in its authenticity. The elderly man, whose silver hair and beard gave him the appearance of a retired professor, looked up as I approached. His eyes, a deep brown that bordered on black, held a quiet intensity that made me want to straighten my tie. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need volume to command attention. "What brings you to our circle?" The question, though simple, made me pause. What exactly had brought me here? The pamphlet, curiosity, desperation? "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. "I found a pamphlet about letting go, and it led me here. I guess I'm looking for something. Answers, maybe. A way to stop feeling like I'm drowning in things that seem important, but never really satisfy." He nodded slowly, as if hearing a familiar song. "The fact that you're here suggests you're ready to begin," he said, gesturing to an empty space in the circle. The Stoics had a saying: "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with you stopping to realize you've been walking in circles." As I took my seat on the cool grass, something shifted in the air. The city sounds seemed to fade, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves overhead. The elderly man, who introduced himself simply as Marcus, folded his hands in his lap and leaned forward slightly. "What we teach here isn't new," he began. "The Stoics understood these truths centuries ago. They developed a philosophy not of escape, but of engagement, a way to be fully present in the world while remaining unshaken by its chaos. They mastered the art of not caring, but not through indifference. They learned to direct their energy toward what truly matters and to release their attachment to everything else." "The first lesson," Marcus said, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that reminded me of waves against a shore, "is perhaps the most crucial. Focus on what you can control." He paused, letting the words settle. "It sounds simple, doesn't it? Almost obvious. But tell me, how much of your daily anxiety comes from things entirely outside your influence? The question hit me like a physical force. Around the circle I saw others nodding, their expressions suggesting they'd experienced the same revelation. A young woman in a corporate suit, Sarah, I would later learn, spoke up. "It's like being caught in a spider web," she said. "The more you struggle against things you can't control, the more entangled you become." Marcus smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. Exactly. The Stoics understood that human suffering often comes from this fundamental confusion. We exhaust ourselves trying to control the uncontrollable. Weather, traffic, other people's thoughts, the past, the future. We waste precious energy fighting against these immovable forces. He reached into a worn leather messenger bag and pulled out small notebooks, passing them around the circle. "Tonight's exercise is deceptively simple," he explained. "Draw a line down the middle of a page. On the left, list everything that's causing you anxiety right now. Be honest, be thorough. On the right, mark which of these things you can directly influence through your actions." The scratching of pens filled the evening air. My own list grew quickly. Meeting presentation next week, client's reaction to proposal, colleague's promotion over me, mother's disappointment in my career choice, growing grey hairs, stock market volatility, ex-partner's new relationship, industry trends, company restructuring, global economic uncertainty. As I began analyzing each item, marking those I could control, a pattern emerged that stopped me cold. Out of my entire list, I could only directly influence perhaps 2 or 3 items. The rest? They were completely beyond my control, yet they occupied vast territories in my mental landscape. "Notice something interesting?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle but knowing. "Most people find that 80% or more of their worries concern things they cannot control. Now, imagine the energy you could reclaim by redirecting your focus to what you can influence." He stood up, walking slowly around the circle. "This doesn't mean ignoring everything outside your control. Instead, it means acknowledging the limits of your influence and choosing where to invest your emotional energy. You can't control if it rains tomorrow, but you can control whether you check the weather and bring an umbrella." The second lesson followed naturally from the first: detach from outcomes. "This is where most people struggle," Marcus explained, now standing beneath a low-hanging branch. "We've been conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to results. But consider this: you can do everything right and still not get the outcome you desire. Conversely, you can do everything wrong and still succeed through sheer luck." A businessman in his 40s, Michael, wearing a slightly loosened tie, shook his head. "But in the corporate world, we're judged entirely by results. How can we detach from outcomes when our careers, our livelihoods depend on them?" Marcus's response was measured but firm. The Stoics weren't advocating for indifference to results. They were suggesting something more subtle. Focus on what you can control: your preparation, your effort, your intentions, and let go of your attachment to specific outcomes. Think of it like an archer. You can control your stance, your breath, your release. But once the arrow leaves the bow, factors beyond your control, wind, movement of the target, even gravity, take over. The mastery lies in giving your absolute best while accepting that the final result isn't entirely in your hands. He pulled out a small hourglass and placed it in the center of our circle. "For the next exercise, I want each of you to share a recent situation where you did everything right but didn't get the desired outcome. Then identify what aspects were in your control and what weren't. More importantly, consider how attachment to the outcome affected your peace of mind." As the sand began to fall, marking the passage of time, I felt something shifting in my understanding. These weren't just philosophical concepts. They were practical tools for reconstructing how I engaged with the world. The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. Someone had quietly lit several lanterns, casting our circle in a warm, gentle glow. The transformation of the space seemed to mirror our own internal shifts, from harsh daylight certainties to more nuanced evening wisdom. The third lesson, Marcus began, his voice taking on a more intimate tone, is perhaps the most challenging in our modern age. Stop seeking approval. He let his gaze move around the circle, meeting each person's eyes. We live in an era of unprecedented social validation. Every thought, every meal, every life event becomes content for others to judge, but this constant seeking of approval is a form of voluntary slavery. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Last week, I spent 2 hours choosing the perfect filter for a LinkedIn post about a minor professional certification, she admitted. The whole time I felt ridiculous, but I couldn't stop obsessing over how it would be received. A murmur of recognition rippled through the group. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature. We're social creatures with an innate desire for acceptance. But they also recognized that making our happiness dependent on others' opinions is a recipe for perpetual dissatisfaction. He reached into his bag again, this time pulling out small mirrors, passing one to each of us. "Look at your reflection," he instructed. "Now, imagine every opinion others have ever expressed about you as layers of paint on that mirror. Some complimentary, some critical, all obscuring your true reflection. The question is, how can you know yourself if you're constantly seeing the image others have painted?" The exercise hit home harder than I expected. Looking into the mirror, I saw not just my face, but years of accumulated judgments. "Not ambitious enough," said my father's voice. "Too focused on work," echoed my ex-partner's criticism. "Natural leader," praised my boss. "Try hard," whispered former colleagues. Layer upon layer of others' perceptions, each one distorting my view of myself. "Your task for the next week," Marcus continued, "is radical honesty with yourself. Before every decision, ask, am I doing this because I truly want to, or am I seeking approval? Notice how often your choices are influenced by anticipated reactions from others." He paused, letting the weight of the assignment sink in. This isn't about becoming selfish or dismissive of others. It's about reclaiming your autonomy. The Stoics believed that true freedom comes from living according to your values, not others' expectations. As the evening deepened, Marcus introduced the fourth lesson: embrace discomfort. "Modern society has made comfort an idol," he said, adjusting his position on the gradually cooling ground. "We've created a world of convenience, of instant gratification. But growth, real, meaningful growth, happens in the space of discomfort." To demonstrate this principle, Marcus had us all stand up. "For the next 3 minutes, I want you to hold a pose that's slightly uncomfortable. Not painful, just uncomfortable. Notice what your mind does." As we held our positions, some standing on one leg, others holding their arms outstretched, he continued speaking. "Notice how your mind immediately begins negotiating with the discomfort. It starts creating stories. This is pointless. I could be doing something else. Maybe I should stop. This is exactly what happens when we face discomfort in life. My own shoulders were beginning to burn from holding my chosen position. I noticed how my thoughts cycled through resistance, bargaining, and resignation. Around me, others showed similar signs of struggle, yet no one broke their pose. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort regularly, Marcus explained as we finally relaxed our positions. They would deliberately expose themselves to cold, hunger, or public embarrassment, not out of masochism, but to build resilience. They understood that avoiding discomfort makes us more vulnerable to life's inevitable challenges. He shared a personal story about how he had once been terrified of public speaking. Instead of avoiding it, he committed to speaking at every opportunity, deliberately seeking out the discomfort until it transformed into strength. The discomfort never fully disappears, he admitted, but your relationship with it changes. You learn to see it as a teacher rather than an enemy. Night had fully settled now, and the lantern light cast dancing shadows through the oak's branches. The city's usual cacophony seemed distant, as if we'd discovered a pocket of timeless space beneath this ancient tree. The air had grown cooler, but nobody seemed inclined to leave. "The fifth and final lesson," Marcus said, his voice taking on an almost ceremonial quality, "is the foundation that gives all other lessons their power. Remember your mortality." He reached into his bag one last time and withdrew what appeared to be an old pocket watch. As he passed it around the circle, we could see it wasn't a watch at all, but a small compass with an unusual face. Instead of cardinal directions, it bore a single phrase repeated around its circumference: "Memento mori." "Remember that you must die," Marcus translated. The Stoics didn't view this as morbid. Instead, they saw it as the ultimate clarifying force. When you truly internalize the finite nature of your time here, everything shifts. Petty grievances fade, priorities crystallize, the inessential falls away. He gestured to the city skyline visible through the trees. "Look out there. Millions of people rushing through their days, postponing their joy, their purpose, their truth, acting as if they have endless time, but each of us has an expiration date. We just don't know what it is." The compass made its way around our circle, each person holding it for a moment before passing it on. When it reached me, its weight felt significant beyond its physical mass. I thought about all the hours I'd spent worrying about things that wouldn't matter in a year, let alone at the end of my life. "For this final exercise," Marcus continued, "I want you to write your own eulogy, not as you hope it will be, but as it would be if you died tomorrow, based on how you're living today. Be brutally honest. Are you living in alignment with what you truly value? Or are you postponing your real life for some imagined future?" The exercise proved gut-wrenching. My eulogy read like a corporate resume, achievements and acquisitions, but little about connection, purpose, or joy. Others in the group shared similar revelations. Sarah's voice cracked as she read hers, recognizing how she'd sacrificed her passion for art in pursuit of corporate success. Michael acknowledged that his children would remember him more for his absences than his presence. "Now," Marcus said after we'd all shared, "write a second eulogy, the one you want to be true. Let the awareness of your mortality guide you toward what really matters." The Stoics believed that contemplating death wasn't about being prepared to die, but about being prepared to live fully. As our gathering drew to a close, Marcus shared one final insight. The art of not caring, as practiced by the Stoics, was never about disconnecting from life. It was about caring so deeply about what truly matters that everything else naturally falls away. They understood that our time and energy are finite resources. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something vital. Standing up, brushing grass from our clothes, we were different people than when we'd arrived. The city's lights seemed less harsh now, its demands less overwhelming. We had tools now, not just philosophical concepts, but practical methods for navigating life's chaos. Over the following weeks and months, I began applying these lessons systematically. I started each day by identifying what was within my control and releasing what wasn't. I practiced detachment from outcomes while maintaining high standards for my effort. I gradually weaned myself off the addiction to approval, learning to validate my own choices. I embraced discomfort as a growth opportunity rather than a threat. And most importantly, I let the awareness of mortality guide my decisions, leading to profound changes in how I spent my time and energy. The transformation wasn't instant or easy. Old habits fought back. There were days when anxiety still gripped me, when the need for validation felt overwhelming. But something fundamental had shifted. I had tools now, a framework for choosing what to care about and what to release. The ancient Stoics weren't trying to escape life's complexities. They were showing us how to engage with life more fully by caring deeply about what matters and releasing what doesn't. Their wisdom, passed down through centuries, offers a path to freedom, not from life's challenges, but from our self-imposed prisons of anxiety and attachment. As I write this now, the pamphlet that started it all sits on my desk, its pages more worn than ever. Sometimes when I pass Oakwood Park, I see new faces gathered beneath the guardian oak, beginning their own journeys. And I smile, knowing that the art of not caring, this profound, counterintuitive wisdom, continues to transform lives, one lesson at a time. The question now isn't whether these lessons work. It's whether you're ready to begin your own practice. Are you prepared to examine what you care about and why? To redistribute your finite energy toward what truly matters? The path is there, marked by centuries of wisdom. The first step is yours to take.